Chapter 15. Overprotective. Although Tommy knew he should probably be worried about someone spying on him when he left the cafe, he had to admit, everyone being overprotective of him was starting to get annoying. First, it started with Wilbur, with his whole insistence that Tommy call him if he ever sensed anyone watching him again, like that night they went to the diner. Then, of course, Wilbur told Techno, who gave Tommy a bottle of pepper spray and a pocket knife, making him promise that if anyone tried shit, he wouldn't hesitate to use either of those things. Then Phil took the pocket knife away, much to Tommy's disappointment, but he let him keep the pepper spray, and doubled down on Wilbur's whole call one of us if you notice anything suspicious at all. Then, of course, Tommy knew he should probably mention it to the syndicate, which made Siren want to set up a guard rotation for the cafe. And Tommy had to argue with the man for nearly 10 minutes over Discord DMs to get it through his head why that would be a terrible idea. It didn't help that Jester came up with the same idea, and Tommy had to spend another 15 minutes explaining everything to him all over again about how he wouldn't exactly be able to explain to his boss why he had a bodyguard. He appreciated how worried everyone was for him, but he was fine. Nothing even happened. He thought someone might be watching him, but that was it. There was no use in panicking over something so small. But yeah, now everyone in Tommy's life was acting ridiculously overprotective of him. Wilbur texted him every time he got off work. It wasn't uncommon for someone from the syndicate, usually Daedalus, Jester, Siren, or Nemesis, to show up at the cafe just to watch over him while he went through the closing shift. And Techno kept talking about wanting to train him in self-defense. The only reason he hadn't yet was because they just hadn't found the time. In complete contrast, Tommy had barely heard from Tubbo and Ronbu in weeks. Ever since he told them that he needed time before he could come home, the two had been keeping their distance. Sometimes he would get a text from Ronbu, asking where he put the soy sauce in the cabinet, or Tubbo would text him just to check that he was alive, but otherwise they didn't bother him. Tommy was frustrated by how conflicted he was over this. On the one hand, they were doing what he asked them to. They were giving him space, and he was grateful for that. But on the other hand, he missed his best friends. He hated whenever he saw a funny meme and went to send it to Tubbo but had to stop himself at the last second. He hated it when he saw a cool recipe he knew Ronbu would love to try and make, but had to stop himself from saving the video. This was what he wanted. He still didn't feel ready to go talk things out, but there was still a hole in his chest that used to be filled by his two best friends. It ached, and he knew that he was going to have to confront things eventually. Eventually. But not yet. At least he had the Soot family. Whenever he got too sad, thinking about Tubbo and Ronbu, Wilbur would usually be there to drag him to his room to ask for advice on songwriting. Or Techno would offer to watch whatever nature documentary on Netflix Tommy wanted to put on. One day, when Wilbur and Techno were both out, but Tommy found the ache of missing his best friends throbbing painfully in his chest, he finally worked up the courage to knock on Phil's office door, like he had offered to Tommy when he first started staying there. Although they had spoken plenty of times now, considering Tommy had been living there for over a month, he still had yet to ever find himself in Phil's office. Until now. "Tommy, is that you?" Phil called out after Tommy had knocked on the door. Yeah, it's me," Tommy called back, already wanting to run back and hide in his room. "Feel free to come in, the door's unlocked." Shit. Well, too late to turn around now. Taking a breath to steady himself, Tommy twisted the doorknob and stepped into the office. The office itself was more quaint than he expected it to be. It wasn't particularly large, although the room wasn't cramped either. There were 2 bookcases on the wall next to the door, and the wall behind Phil's head, both filled with a wide array of books that Tommy didn't recognize the titles of. There was a soft-looking, worn leather couch behind Phil's desk, with a few blankets tossed over the cushions. Then there was Phil's desk itself, which was a grand old thing made of dark wood, with 2 large computer monitors sitting on top. There were also several candles burning, Tommy noticed. There was a dark orange one next to Phil's computer, along with 2 more sitting on the bookshelves. It made the room smell of cinnamon, apples, and sandalwood, and it almost reminded Tommy of the cafe. Phil was leaning back in his desk chair, eyes skimming some article on one of his monitors, but he turned his gaze away from the computer when Tommy walked in. "Hi, Tommy," Phil said, smiling at Tommy as he walked into the office. "Feel free to sit down wherever you like." There was another small chair settled near Phil's desk, one that he could, hypothetically, drag over so he could be closer to Phil, but he decided against it for the time being, and plopped down on the couch instead. As soon as his butt hit the seat, though, he started sliding down the leather, and yelped as he tried to steady himself on the smooth surface. Phil, unsurprisingly, let out a sharp laugh. "Oh yeah, I should have warned you about that. That couch can be pretty damn slippery at times," Phil told him, with mirth dancing in his eyes. "How the fuck do you even get a couch this smooth?" Tommy asked, grunting, as he pushed himself back up to a normal sitting position. "It's just from being worn down over the years," Phil explained, grinning at him. "I've had that couch since before I adopted Wilbur and Tech." "Damn, so this is ancient then. It's a miracle it's still standing," Tommy snarked, sliding down again, and eventually deciding it'd be easier to just lay across the damn thing. "Wow, calling all 3 of us old in one go, huh?" Tommy smirked. "Well, obviously. All 3 of you could qualify to go to an old person's home, I'm sure. But don't worry, Phil. I'd never send you to an old person home. Only Will and Tech." "I appreciate it, mate. Glad to know I got my youngest on my side," Phil joked, seemingly oblivious to the slip-up he'd just made. Tommy didn't miss it, though. He froze, the words, "my youngest," repeating in his head. What did Phil mean by his youngest? Tommy was the youngest in the house, sure, but from the way Phil worded that, it almost seemed like he was implying that Tommy was the youngest of his kids. That Tommy was one of his sons, just like Techno and Wilbur. Phil noticed the way Tommy stiffened, and seemed to catch onto what he said. "Oh, I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, Tommy," Phil stammered, suddenly straightening up in his seat. "Guess you've just been staying with us for so long, you know, He cut himself off with a nervous laugh. "I'm just being silly. Sorry about that." Tommy stared at Phil, trying to get a read on what he was saying. He wasn't taking back the implications in his words, just apologizing for possibly making Tommy uncomfortable. There were 2 ways Tommy could react to this. He could let the fear gnawing at his insides rise up, lash out, and run away like he had done before when anyone acted like they wanted to try and parent him. It never worked out. They never actually wanted Tommy. They wanted a perfect child, who they could mold in their own image. But Phil wasn't like that. Tommy knew that. And there was another way he could react to this. He could trust that Phil wouldn't push too far and too fast. He could trust that this family was different from the others. He could trust that he already had a brother out of Wilbur, and while he might not exactly know Phil well enough to think of him as a father, that didn't mean that day would never come. Tommy chose the latter option. "Do you see me as a son figure, Phil's a soot?" Tommy asked with a shit-eating grin. The tension immediately dropped from Phil's shoulders, and he chuckled to himself. "Oh, maybe a little bit. I don't know, I guess you living with us just reminds me of the first few months I had Wilbur here, and it's making me nostalgic. But I get you haven't known me for very long, and you have your own life with your own job and apartment that you're going to want to go back to eventually. So don't feel any pressure to stay here just because I'm a sappy old man." He paused then, smile softening as he tapped his finger on the arm of his chair. "Just know that even after you leave, you'll always have a home here if you ever want to come back." Oh, a home. Tommy could have a home here. His throat suddenly felt a bit tight, and he had to swallow a few times before he could speak. "I appreciate that a lot," he said softly, keeping his eyes on the floor. I don't really know what I'm going to do once I talk to Tubbo and Ranboo again, but I'll remember that." You don't need to know your plans yet. Just know that the door here will always be open for you. But if you don't end up going through it, none of us will mind. Phil told him, still smiling. There was a silence between them. Tommy wondered if he was supposed to say something else, if he should make an effort to continue the conversation. But thankfully, Phil spoke again before he had to try and figure it out. So anyway, ignoring all that sappy shit, what did you want to come see me for? Phil asked, rolling his shoulders as the nostalgic look in his eyes faded. Oh, I didn't have a real reason, Tommy admitted, ducking his head again. It's just, you said I could come into your office if I ever wanted, and Will and Techno aren't here, and I was kinda, lonely. Bored. But I can leave if you're busy, I don't want to distract you from work. Tommy, it's fine, Phil reassured him, gesturing for him to sit back down when he started to stand. I was just thinking of taking a break from work anyway. It's boring shit that I really don't feel like doing right now, he said, clicking out of a few windows on one of his monitors without letting Tommy see what they were. Usually when I take breaks from work, I play video games. Do you play a lot of games? Tommy shrugged. I've played Animal Crossing on Will's old GameCube, and I've played Mario Kart before on a DS. I think one of the foster homes I was in had a Wii, but I don't think I got to play much before they sent me back. Sympathy flashed across Phil's face, but it was only for a brief moment before he was reaching under his desk. Well, have you ever played Halo? I've heard of it, Tommy said, remembering how in one of his foster homes, his brother had spent hours on end playing it, but would yell at Tommy to get out of the room if he ever tried to watch. Don't know much about it, though. You want to play? Phil asked as he straightened up from under the desk with 2 Xbox controllers in his hands. Do I get to do cool stuff in it? Tommy asked, already reaching for the controller. You get to shoot aliens in the face. Tommy grinned. Sounds poggers as hell. Matching his smile, Phil switched the monitor to the video game, and Tommy watched the Xbox loading screen start up. As it turned out, Tommy was not very good at Halo. He had never played one of those shooty games before. Phil called it a first-person shooter or an FPS because he was a fucking nerd. And the controls were nothing like Animal Crossing or Mario Kart. Phil did his best to teach Tommy how to play, but even with the NPCs set on easy mode, Tommy kept getting his ass handed to him. Eventually, Phil switched the game mode over so there were no enemies to kill, and instead it was just the 2 of them in an empty valley with random weapons and vehicles scattered all over the place. Once Tommy found a strange purple plane thing that Phil called a ghost, he stopped caring about trying to aim the gun in the right direction. Instead, he just started flying around the whole map in his alien spaceship, cheering while Phil tried to shoot him down. Tommy had a lot of fun that day, even if he did suck at Halo. After that, he started going to Phil's office when Wilbur and Techno weren't home, and the 2 would play games like Halo or Minecraft, which Tommy had never even heard of before Phil, and quickly realized it was one of the best games in the world, second only to Animal Crossing. Nearly 2 weeks after Wilbur and Tommy had felt eyes watching them when they left the cafe, Tommy found himself once again arguing about how he really didn't need someone to walk him home. Nemesis, I'm telling you, I'm fine, Tommy insisted, his keys jingling in his pocket as he finished the last of the closing routine for the cafe. Why can't you just let me walk you to the subway station? Nemesis asked, leaning against the counter while Tommy pushed the mop towards the back room. She had a cup of hot chocolate in her hands, the steam curling up and around her face as she took small sips of it. Because every hero in the goddamn city is gunning it for you right now, and I'd rather not have to fix your cracked skull again, Tommy said, grunting as he shoved the mop in the broom closet. Plus, if there's anyone I should avoid being seen in public with, it's you. I already know your name, and that alone is risky as shit for the both of us. Nemesis huffed, pushing a few strands of cotton candy hair out of her face. I know, but I'm just worried about you. We all are. Her voice softened at this part, and Tommy resisted the urge to sigh because he understood that they were just worried about him, and he really appreciated it. But again, the overprotectiveness was a little frustrating. Damn right we are. another voice chimed in. Thanatos strolled out from the cafe bathroom, readjusting the skull mask on his face that he'd replaced his original blue and red goggles with after his rebranding. Then he settled himself next to Nemesis, their shoulders brushing as he lifted up his own iced coffee. Yes, he asked Tommy for an iced coffee at midnight, and took a long sip with loud slurping noises coming from the straw. It was the first time Tommy had seen Thanatos in person since he healed him all that time ago, and it was relieving for him to see that his powers had done wonders on the burn scars. Sure, they were still there, but Thanatos didn't have trouble moving with them, and didn't seem to be in any pain, so that was enough for Tommy to think of it as a job well done. Not to mention, he liked talking with Thanatos. The guy was funny, and banter flowed easily between the two of them. Tommy had a feeling that if he ever met Thanatos in civilian form, the two of them would become fast friends. "Not you too," Tommy groaned, slamming the door to the broom closet shut. "Come on, Thanatos, you know I'm a big man. You're all such fucking mother hens."
"Yeah, because you've been watched by some creepy fuck that probably doesn't have great intentions,"
Thanatos shot back.
"But I gotta admit, you also have a good point about not being seen with Nemesis."
"Thanatos," Nemesis protested.
"You know I'm right."
Thanatos shot back.
"You're literally one of the most wanted villains in the city right now. If there's anyone Tommy shouldn't be seen with, it's you."
"Exactly, which means I'm walking home by myself," Tommy said, slinging his backpack over his shoulder as he headed towards the doors. "Come on, you two, get out of my cafe before I drag your asses out." The two villains followed Tommy towards the doors, checking to make sure no one was out on the street who could see them. Once they were all outside, Tommy twisted the lock to secure the door, and then raised an eyebrow at the two waiting villains. "All right, you two, get going now. I got it from here," Tommy said, making shooing motions at the two of them. Thanatos, who once again sipped loudly on his iced coffee, huffed.
"If anything happens to you, you better call one of us, got it?"
Rolling his eyes, Tommy nodded. "I've promised this about 10 times now. Yes, I'm fine." With one final nod, Thanatos patted Tommy on the shoulder, while Nemesis gently ruffled his hair. Then the two turned down the opposite street Tommy had to walk down to get to the subway station, and Tommy watched until they turned a corner and were gone from sight. Then Tommy headed out towards the subway station. He kept his phone in hand, looking for that prickling feeling in the back of his neck that would tell him if he was being watched, but he didn't feel it. His eyes skimmed the rooftops across the street, but he didn't see any more strange flashes of white. The only sounds on the street were his footsteps squelching against the wet concrete, as it had rained earlier that afternoon, and the sidewalk was still damp. He didn't have an umbrella, but the rain seemed to be over. Still, Tommy kept nervously glancing up at the swirling clouds above his head, feeling the weight of the moisture in the air, and he hurried his footsteps just in case his luck decided to die out tonight and the downpour started up again. Tommy was so focused on the clouds in the sky and searching for movement on the rooftops that he didn't even notice the two figures across the street until there was a sudden shout.
"Shit, that's not exactly helping,"
a man yelped.
"I'm sorry, but we need to get home one way or another,"
the other person replied. Whipping his head across the street, it took Tommy a moment to locate the two figures bathed in the orange glow of the streetlight. One was leaning heavily against the other, and they were walking with the pained slowness that could only come from an injury. It took Tommy a moment to recognize Monarch. He hadn't seen them since they'd saved him from getting mugged over a year before, but their general look was relatively the same. White blouse, gold corset, and a literal cape that was made out of a sheer, sparkling fabric that looked like actual stars. Everything about Monarch screamed royalty, as they were the type of vigilante to go all out with matching their look to their name. And if that wasn't enough, the mask that covered the lower half of their face was white and gold, and covered in gorgeous embroidery, and they had a literal golden crown to keep their hair back. The other person with Monarch, though, Tommy didn't recognize him. He was about the same height as Monarch, although had significantly broader shoulders and very well-muscled arms. Like, this guy wasn't as buff as the Blade, but he was close. His face was completely covered by a golden mask, shaped in a way that made him look like a living statue. He was dressed in a similar color scheme to Monarch, but with more gold as opposed to white accents. His clothing was looser and made of more draping fabrics, and it reminded Tommy of something you'd wear in a desert. Wait, the syndicate had mentioned Monarch had a new partner, right? Aurelian, the guy who dressed in a bunch of gold? This guy certainly fit that description. The man he presumed to be Aurelian was the one leaning heavily against Monarch's side, and even from across the street, Tommy could see a dark splotch on his shirt that must have been blood. Monarch was struggling to guide Aurelian down the street, and although Tommy had no clue where they lived, it didn't look like they should wait that long for Aurelian to get medical attention. All right, guess he was back on the clock. Hey! Tommy shouted as he walked across the street, causing both vigilantes' heads to whip up. You guys okay? Aurelian started, before Monarch shot him a look, and he dragged the syllable out instead. Tommyinnit? Yeah, we're doing great tonight. How about you, random citizen?
Excuse him. He's delirious from blood loss.
Monarch apologized, looking sheepish. Yeah, okay. Aurelian definitely seemed like he was a bit delirious. You guys are Monarch and Aurelian, right? Tommy asked, although who the hell else would be dressed like this, bleeding out on a random street at this time of night?
That's us.
Monarch answered.
If you need help with something, though, you might want to call the authorities instead of us. As you can see, Aurelian isn't in great shape right now.
I'm fine, just a small stab wound, we're good. Aurelian insisted, despite the fact that he couldn't stand up straight. A stab wound isn't very good, Tommy deadpanned. In fact, it's kinda shit. You look like you need help.
We'll be fine. We're heading back to my place now, so we can get him patched up.
Monarch explained, grunting again when Aurelian slumped further against them. How far away is that? Because he doesn't seem like he's going to be able to walk for much longer, Tommy pointed out.
Just a few blocks. We'll make it no problem,
Monarch said, although Tommy could hear the uncertainty in their tone. A few blocks. They were only 1 block away from the cafe. Well, it's not like the syndicate ever said he wasn't allowed to heal non-villains, right? Besides, it's not like he could just leave a vigilante to bleed out, especially when the vigilante in question was Monarch's partner. Tommy still owed Monarch for saving him that one time, after all. I can patch you up. My place is only a block away from here, Tommy said, jerking his thumb back towards the cafe. Monarch frowned.
You have a first aid kit?
Tommy snorted. I have everything you'll need to get that fixed up, he told them. Plus I have a lot of experience with patching up wounds like this.
You do?
Aurelian questioned, sounding a bit breathless now. Sure do. Now are we gonna go before Aurelian bleeds out, or what? Tommy questioned, raising an eyebrow at Monarch. Monarch's frown deepened, their pure white eyes crinkling at the corners as they glanced down at Aurelian, as if checking to see what he thought. Tommy had no idea how they had a silent exchange when Aurelian's entire face was hidden behind his mask, but they certainly seemed to, because after a few beats, Monarch nodded.
Okay, we'll go with you,
Monarch said. Sounds good. I'll lead the way, Tommy told them, turning on his heel and leading them towards the cafe. It was a slow-going process. Aurelian really wasn't doing too hot, despite his insistence that it was just a baby stab wound and nothing to get worked up about. At one point, Tommy ducked around to his other side to help Monarch carry him, and the two worked together to drag Aurelian towards the cafe. Was it a good idea for Tommy to be bringing the two of them to the cafe? They were vigilantes, after all. Vigilantes he didn't know. With the syndicate, not only did he have an arrangement, but he trusted them. And obviously he trusted Nuke and Ender not to blow his secret, but what would Monarch and Aurelian think? They ended up passing the front of the cafe and going around the back so they could go through the back room. Tommy wasn't too keen to enter in the front, with 2 vigilantes following him, especially now that he might have had a stalker, so he figured the extra steps were worth it. Thankfully, Tommy also had a key for the back door. As Monarch leaned Aurelian against a wall in the alleyway, Tommy twisted the lock to open the back door, and the room lit up with harsh white lights as he darted to set up his area. Dumping his backpack on the floor, Tommy spread out the towels and yanked the first aid kit out like he always did. Then, with his area prepared, he called out, "Monarch, you can bring him in now." Monarch grunted as they pulled Aurelian off the wall and guided him into the back room. Tommy shut the door behind them and gestured for Monarch to set Aurelian down on the towels. As soon as Aurelian was laying down, though, he let out a confused noise.
Wait, why the hell are we at the Cloudy Cafe?
"I work here, so I had the keys." Tommy shrugged, kneeling down next to Aurelian and moving to lift his shirt. Monarch settled down on the opposite side of Aurelian and eyed the towels Tommy had laid down.
"You seem like you've done this before,"
they commented. Tommy snorted as he carefully peeled the fabric back from the bloody wound, sighing in relief when he saw it had clean edges, done with a knife and not a piece of debris. That would be a lot easier to deal with. Yeah, you could say that.
Dude, what do you mean? You've done this before?
Aurelian asked, his voice strained as Tommy pressed gauze on the wound.
Do you really just regularly bandage stab wounds in the back room of the cafe you work at?
Pretty much, Tommy shrugged, nodding to himself as he cleaned up the worst of the blood. All right, now, don't move for a few seconds. Aurelian made a noise like he was about to ask another question, but Tommy put his hands over the wound before he could, and he let out a pained whine. Monarch leaned forward to see what Tommy was doing, and flinched when Tommy's hands began to glow. Closing his eyes, Tommy sunk into the energy flowing out of his hands. It wasn't a bad stab wound, and while he was definitely going to have a headache after this, it wouldn't be anything terrible. When Tommy lifted his hands, the only evidence of the stab wound was a faint scar on Aurelian's side. Sitting back, Tommy wiped his hands off on the edge of the towel and took a moment to catch his breath. Then he opened his eyes to find both Monarch and Aurelian staring at him.
You have healing powers?
Aurelian questioned, poking at his scar as if he wasn't sure it was real. Sure do. I would have just healed you on the street, but I figured someone might see us. Plus it's easier if I'm able to look at the thing in proper lighting like this before I heal. Tommy explained, pushing to his feet to get himself a glass of water. As he reached for the glasses, he almost grabbed 2 more for Aurelian and Monarch as well, before realizing they wouldn't be able to drink without removing their masks. So he ended up just grabbing one for himself, and greedily gulped down the cool water from the filter pitcher in the fridge. Once he set the glass down, he saw that Monarch was leaning over to look at the healed stab wound. Meanwhile, Aurelian seemed to be watching Tommy, but it was hard to tell with his mask covering so much of his face. If you're gonna stare so much, take a picture, Tommy muttered, grumbling as he took another sip of his water. Aurelian didn't look away.
So you heal people, like, in this cafe, on a regular basis?
Yeah. I heal people in, your line of work, Tommy muttered, unsure if he should mention to the vigilantes that he heals villains.
Vigilantes?
Monarch asked, cocking their head to the side. Yeah, Tommy said, eyes fixating on the wall behind Monarch's head. And, others? Monarch narrowed their glowing white eyes at him, and Tommy had to suppress the urge to shiver at how unsettling that was.
You mean villains, don't you? You heal villains in this cafe?
Aurelian gasped, shooting upright. Shit. This might not go as well as he thought. Monarch, I thought you were on neutral terms with villains, Tommy asked, remembering the discussion they had had on Monarch and Aurelian during the syndicate meeting.
I am when they're not harming civilians. I never said I had a problem with you healing them.
Monarch shrugged.
Well, I have a problem with it,
Aurelian exclaimed.
Why are you healing villains in the back of this cafe?
Tommy frowned. I thought you were trained by Monarch, and they literally just said they don't care. What's your problem? Aurelian huffed, folding his arms over his chest as he glanced around the back room again.
I guess I should clarify. I don't have a problem with you healing villains. But why do you have to do it in this cafe?
Because I live in a tiny apartment with roommates, and this place is just easy to get to. Tommy really didn't understand what Aurelian's fixation on the cafe was. Why the hell do you care so much? What are you, a regular customer of mine or something? Man, wouldn't that be the icing on the cake? Not only would he have villains stopping in to get coffee on a regular basis, but he'd have vigilantes too. The Cloudy Cafe would be super central. Aurelian shared another look with Monarch, who gave him a tiny shake of their head in response to whatever his silent question was. At this, Aurelian sighed deeply.
You could say that,
he said, picking at the threads of his shirt.
I'm familiar with the place, and I know the owner. Does she know about this?
Tommy shook his head. No. But I clean everything up as soon as I'm done, and it's only after I close for the night. Her business isn't affected.
Yeah, sure, but you're still literally using her back room to heal supervillains,
Aurelian exclaimed, bolts of electricity flickering around his fingertips. It was kind of mesmerizing to watch how it danced between each of his fingers in little blue zaps, and Tommy could only imagine how painful it would be to get hit by a large one of those. Monarch put their hand on Aurelian's shoulder after his outburst, and their electricity died down. Aurelian's shoulders dropped, and there was an awkward silence while Tommy waited for one of them to speak again.
Why did you offer to help us?
Monarch then asked, clearly trying to change the subject.
I mean, I'm sure you knew we were going to ask about this kind of stuff.
Tommy rolled his eyes. What, you expect me to just leave you and Lightning Boy alone on the street so he can bleed out? He leaned against the counter, folding his arms over his chest. No, I don't do that. I help vigilantes and villains because you guys can't get health care anywhere else. So I wasn't just going to let Aurelian bleed out because you might ask me a few awkward questions. Monarch nodded, something softening in their white gaze.
You must be a very compassionate person,
they commented, and although Tommy couldn't see under their mask, he had a feeling they were smiling at him. Ugh, shut up about me being compassionate and shit. Everyone I heal says that, and I'm just trying to be a decent human being, Tommy grumbled, shaking his head. Monarch laughed, and it was a warm, filling sound.
Well, if it's worth anything, I think you're very kind, and that it takes more than a decent human being to do what you do.
Once again, everyone says that, Tommy muttered, downing the rest of his water.
Maybe you should consider that it's true, then.
Monarch chuckled again. Then they pushed to their feet, their tall boots thumping loudly against the tile floor.
Aurelian, you good to go?
Yeah, help me up, Aurelian said, holding out a hand. Monarch grunted as they pulled Aurelian to his feet. Then, Monarch reached out a hand to steady Aurelian, before they both turned back to look at Tommy.
What's your name, by the way?
Monarch asked. Tommy.
Nice to meet you, Tommy,
Monarch said, dipping their head.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you too, Tommy. And, thanks for healing me.
Aurelian added on, sounding a lot less incredulous than he had a few minutes before.
Sorry about, getting worked up like that. But you really do need your own place to do this stuff at, you know?
Ah, yes, I'll use my barista salary to buy myself a clinic. Great fucking idea, Tommy snarked.
Hey man, just saying, goals for the future.
Aurelian shot back, holding his hands up in mock surrender. I'll keep that in mind, Tommy said flatly. With one final wave, Monarch and Aurelian walked back out into the alleyway, letting the door swing shut behind them. Turning his head back to the floor, Tommy looked at the now bloodied towels scattered across the floor and sighed. And here he thought he'd have an early night. Rolling up his sleeves, he got to work on cleaning. A little while later, Tommy had just finished up cleaning the back room and was heading back into the front of the cafe. As he slung his backpack over his shoulder, keys in hand so he could lock the front door again when he left, there was a loud buzzing from his phone. Taking his phone out, he resisted the urge to groan when he saw Wilbur's name flashing across the screen. Tommy was late coming home. That meant he was going to get a lecture. Yeah, I know I'm late, Tommy said as soon as he answered the phone, trudging across the cafe towards the front doors. Why are you late? Is everything okay? Wilbur asked, voice dripping with concern. Everything's fine. Don't be such a dramatic bitch. The espresso machine just fucked up again, Tommy lied. Even though Tubbo and Ronbu had stopped falling for that a while ago, the Soots hadn't gotten that far yet, which meant Tommy could go back to pinning all his problems on the stupid goddamn espresso machine. The thing deserved it. It was a piece of junk. Wilbur breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, that's fine. I just got worried. But are you sure there's nothing weird outside? Well, besides 2 vigilantes? I'm not outside yet. I'm headed out right now, and I'll let you know, Tommy said, putting the phone between his shoulder and his ear as he opened the door to the cafe. When I get home, though, can we watch another Ghibli movie? Like whatever the one you were telling me about most recently is. The one with the old lady and the wizard that Techno says acts like you. Wilbur sighed on the other end. Oh, fuck off. I'm not like Howell. If anything, Techno's more similar since he spends way more time on his hair than I do. I dunno, Will. You have like 3 different hair gels. Tommy teased him. They're used for different kinds of looks, Wilbur argued. You know what? When you get home, I'm going to show you my hair products and then show you Techno's hair stuff. And you can compare which one of us is worse. Twisting the key into the lock, Tommy hummed in response. There was the satisfying click as the lock was shut, and he pocketed his keys before grabbing the phone to hold it again. All right, bitch, I'm... Another voice cut him off before he could update Wilbur.
Tommy.
Whipping around, a rock the size of a goddamn boulder dropped in Tommy's gut as his eyes met a simple, smiley face set against a porcelain mask. It was Dream. The Dream. The #1 hero Dream. The one who had nearly killed every member of the Syndicate at some point or another. The one who could have killed Tubbo and Ronbu just for being vigilantes. Tommy's breathing hitched. Dream was standing right in front of the cafe in all his #1 hero glory. And he knew Tommy's name. Tommy, you just went quiet. Are you okay? Wilbur asked, his voice tinny over the phone. Dream, Tommy stammered out, frozen as he stared at the superhero. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the phone. Dream is there. Shit. Fuck, Tommy, I need you to... Suddenly, the phone was flying out of Tommy's hand. He could only watch with wide eyes as the phone was pulled into Dream's hand as if being yanked by an invisible string. Then, without looking away from Tommy, Dream chucked the phone at the ground and stomped on it with a loud crunch, and Tommy's heart skipped a beat as the screen immediately went black.
Sorry about that, but this isn't a conversation for outside ears,
Dream said, his calm tone sending chills down Tommy's spine. I don't know what conversation you'd want with me, big man, Tommy said, a voice in his head screaming, play dumb, over and over at him. I'm just a little old barista boy, you know? Don't see why the great Dream would want...
Shut up and stop playing dumb. I know what you've been doing,
Dream told him.
I mean, working out of the back room of the cafe you work at isn't exactly the most subtle way to run a healing business.
Tommy clenched his jaw. Fuck. I don't know what you're talking about, Tommy repeated, although the lie felt weak, even to his own ears. I don't even have powers, let alone healing powers. His own laughter was forced, and reminded him of nails on a chalkboard. Dream took a step towards him, and Tommy stumbled backwards. Maybe he could make a break for the subway station, or at least for one of the alleyways and hide behind a dumpster or something. Either way, he had to get the hell away from Dream.
Don't make this difficult on yourself,
Dream said, taking another step his way. Tommy took another step back, on instinct, but shrieked when he bumped into another body behind him. Twisting his head so he could look behind him, ice-cold fear raced down his spine when he met the signature white goggles of 404. What the... Before Tommy could say anything, 404 placed his hands on either side of Tommy's head.
Sleep,
he ordered, and Tommy had no choice but to obey. As the world went dark, he felt strong arms catch him before he hit the ground, and the last thing he saw before being swallowed by the void were the beady eyes of Dream's mask.